I want that. Okay.
All right. Hey, this is Christina Simmons with the Say Yes to Holiness podcast. I'm here with Jim Henry today, and I'm really excited to have him be able to share with you what it is that he does, his particular ministry, and his outreach within his community, but also because he's getting ready to relaunch his book. So we're going to talk about all of those things, but welcome, Jim, to the podcast. And would you go ahead and kind of tell people a little bit about yourself and where you're located?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm located in northern New Jersey. Uh, Story is that about 34 years ago, my life got turned upside down when my first wife was diagnosed with breast cancer. We'd been in ministry for about 17, 18 years. And she was diagnosed, and it was aggressive breast cancer. And as with a lot of people, I mean, I've been in ministry for a long time at that point, and but nevertheless, it still turned our lives upside down in every conceivable way.
Right.
And, the future, the same. Had to make different choices about what we were going to do. Um, we both wound up doing very different things than we had planned on doing. We certainly didn't plan on her having a battle with cancer and 4 kids, and we didn't plan on any of that. So, and
Yeah, life happens that
I
way,
had a
doesn't it?
course all planned out for my life. Oh yeah, I had my plans also what I thought I was supposed to do. Even though I was doing ministry, I mean, I had a direction I thought I was supposed to follow. But when that came along after a period of time, my wife said to me, "I don't want to be in the fishbowl anymore." And I said, "She said, I don't want to be in the fishbowl anymore." And I knew exactly what she meant. I said, "How long have you felt that way?" She said, "Since we started." I said, "Oh my." So she felt she
Yep.
was supposed to be a beautiful wife and just go along for the ride, and she shared in a lot of the things like that. But she really wasn't crazy about being there. So when the cancer hit and she was looking mortality in the eyeball, and we both were, we knew we had to make some different choices. So it sent us down a totally different.
Yeah, could you share a little bit about that? Because I think that
Yeah,
led to where you are today, didn't it?
yeah, it did. It surely did. I mean, we have when we came to New Jersey in 1979, and when we got here, we had 2 children, and then I I pastored for a year, and then I went to work for the 700 Club, and was with them for a few years in North Jersey, and then when I left them, uh, I was teaching for about a year and a half, and then I opened a counseling center. I was doing grad school at that point, and I was actually planning on doing more ministry work. And I had a very last class in seminary working on a DMin was on healing, and question was asked by the professor class, "What are you doing to intentionally healing to people?" And I realized that I was like other people. I was just letting people come to me instead of going to people.
Right.
And it was very different. And, I spent about 3.5 hours one night, and I really felt like, and it wasn't directly related to my wife's situation because she was a patient at the time. It was directed really to the call that I had from the Lord that night that said, "Do something about this cancer thing." And actually, it was kind of a funny encounter because I said, "Well, what do you want me to do?" I felt that was the next logical question to ask. "All right, Lord, what do you want?" And he was silent, didn't respond, and said, "I guess I got to figure this out." So started praying with some people, and we wound up when I came back to New Jersey from Oklahoma. I had some friends that met with me. We prayed for about 11 months, 10, 11 months. And then I opened a center to deal with the spiritual and the emotional conflict created by a diagnosis. Totally out of my league. I've been counseling, ministering to people, a lot of people, but I was stepping into an arena that was very, very different than any place I'd ever been. And all I did was we opened, literally opened by faith. We didn't have any backers. We didn't have any money. We found a space. The people that had the space gave me the space for 2 years rent free. And they paid the rent, they paid the utilities and everything. And they said, go to work. They were believers. So they said, just go do it. Go see what you can get done. So we started. And it's morphed to one thing after another, and helping people. And after a number of months there, I don't know, 4 or 5 months there, got an invitation from through a friend to meet with an oncologist that she knew about an hour from where the office was. And he was looking for somebody to come and help them, their patients in the office. So I did. I went and started seeing people in the office, and we started doing group meetings in there. Did some one-on-one, did some groups in the office for him, and was doing more stuff on the outside, and it just began to grow, and we began to share with other people. And the first 6 months I was in my office, I met a researcher in New York City who spent all his life working with cancer patients, people who were really critical, people who had what most people today would call end stage, weeks to live, days to live. And he had developed a plan for working with people and saw 50 to 55% of the ones that he was working with go into some form of remission. And none of them were supposed to leave that facility. Everybody, where they were supposed to leave that facility in New York, was in a body bag. Nobody was expected to walk out of the place he was working. And so I read about his work and read what he was doing. It resonated with me because he was talking about helping individuals cover. The way he put it was the song you were created to sing, and you and I would talk about that in terms of what's the will of God for your life. What did God create you for? What's unique about your life? What are you here to do? And so I began working with him. I wanted to see the same kind of results he saw. Quite honestly, when I started, because the first time we met, he looked at me and he laughed and he asked me about my background, and I told him. And I was an engineer by training, and I had worked in Pratt & Whitney Aircraft, worked with the space industry for a while, and then in the U.S. Army for a season for years. And he said, you got about 8 strikes against you. And he began to list all these reasons why I shouldn't do this. And in the back of my head, I knew he asked me to do this, and I said, well, that's okay. I said, I can learn. And so then he began telling me how I could go about getting involved, and started giving me names of people that maybe I could connect with. And then he threw his own name in the mix, and then he went on and threw somebody else. I said, whoa, stop. I said, did you say you'd work with me? And he just smiled, kind of snickered, and said, yeah. So I said, when do we start? And we started. And it was a real eye-opener for me, and working with them. But then little by little, people respond to the things that I was doing to try to help them. And the one I was pouring most of it into was my wife at the time. And she lived some of the best years of her life in that middle season, 2.5 years or so after she was diagnosed, and about 2 years before she passed. In that in the dash in the middle. She lived a lot of life, and
Hmm.
saw that what she, what he had, what I was now doing, was starting to reap some fruit and some benefits. First for my wife, and I was I was really excited about that. So she, after she passed, uh, I took a couple of months and spent some time with my kids, and then had a meeting with some friends in my office, and they all said to me that you got to do something with this. You got to take this and you got to start sharing this with people. And so
Hmm.
we began looking to package it and share. Did a number of different things. We shared, made some videos years ago. That was an experience just doing that because they were all VHS videos and it was a big project, a lot of money. We didn't have any of
Hmm.
it. And anyway, it was a faith thing, but we started touching lives in a lot of different places, and we found people were getting helped, and we saw the same results. We saw that Larry had. We saw people that were going into some form of remission, some for a short time, some for a long time. In some
Hmm.
situations, we saw disease disappear, cancers disappearing. Um, so we just we just kept
Hmm.
going, and then ultimately in 1999, we adopted the name the Life Givers Network,
Mm.
and that's what we vision. What my wife and I saw years ago, and we didn't have a name for it, was we saw this entity that would appear in every community across the country because every community has people with life-threatening illness, and
Right.
that this would be encouraging people to, you know, that the diagnosis, the way we put it simply, is the diagnosis doesn't have to be the beginning of the end, but it can
Hmm.
be a whole new beginning. And when we show people, even people that have real short-term diagnosis, weeks, months, we see people blow past those
Hmm.
diagnoses.
Yeah.
Not all of them, you know, a lot of people have and gone on to live and be more productive than they've ever been in life before. So that's exciting. You know, that's been
Mhm.
exciting. That part
It
of it.
is definitely. Oh wow. What a great story of how it is that you just simply trusted that you were supposed to step on this path, even if quote you had all those strikes against you, and see what the Lord has done. So where is Life Givers Network now? You know, kind of like so. Just kind of describe a little bit about you just shared about having it like in each local community. That was kind of what you had envisioned. So what does it become?
Well, we've got at one point we had 16 groups here, and some of the people that were leading them um, passed, and nobody wanted to pick it up from where they were. So, um, you know, it's declined. And we've added a few new ones. We got some places where people wanted to start, but we knew we had to do it a little bit differently. This
Mm-hmm.
whole thing with the COVID has really changed everything, and we had people for years that we needed to find another way to reach patients because we found a lot of people that didn't want to go to groups, and the reason they didn't want to go to groups was because they didn't want to listen to the negative chatter that would come back at them. They just wanted a positive experience. Um, our
Mm-hmm.
groups weren't all uh, happy, touchy kind of things, but they were very upbeat. The groups were upbeat. Um, the joy of the Lord was always present. We had people laughing, crying, you know, just having a wonderful time sharing life together. And we watched people over the years, we've watched people from the groups build very, very close bonds. We learned a lot of things about doing groups, but we saw that there were some other things we needed to do, some new things we needed to do. So we began to work on some new materials and also to shorten, simplify things that we were presenting. Because at one point, a few years back, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago, um, I walked in the office and I told the woman that was working with me that administratively, and it helped me put a lot of the stuff together. I said, you know, we got to make this easier for people because I felt like people were choking on what we were trying to give them. It was too much. They couldn't take it. They needed something simple, and I was probably given too much because of my own background, where I was coming from, my education, how I did kind of things. So we began to really make it a whole lot simpler and present concepts that people could easily remember. And then we started doing workshops based around that. Very simple pattern. Um, we had 4 things we were presenting to people in the workshop. And we had boiled it down where I was telling people, at the meeting, I said, I'm going to give you 4 letters. And if you can remember these 4 letters and what they stand for, which I felt that most people could do, it was simple enough that they could grab that. I said, if you can do and think about this and take what we give you, nothing more, just take that and run with it. I said, you can keep yourself alive and live a much more productive life. And people look at you. And so that's what we did. And the 4 things we gave, the 4 letters we gave were BSTA: begin different, see different, think different, act different. And people grabbed that and they started to run with that. And then yours truly had a back a few years ago. And that right when I was planning a whole lot of workshops in major places around here. That put me on my back for a while again. Had to just back up and retool, as they say. And so we've been working with that, and so now we're looking at just putting everything online, and where it seems that we're headed for is in June, when we release the reprint of the book that I did. New cover, new look, new interiors, some freshness, some new material in the back, and a lot more ability online for things online. We're going to go in that direction, and I think we're going to use a membership group and be able to help people with simple concepts, simple principles from week to week. Whoever wants to, be involved. People that are serious about wanting to get well, stay well, work at it. I don't want people just on there wasting people's time, but we want people that are working at it, because it's work to get well. It's hard. It's hard work.
Yeah, you made mention of your book.
Everything is just, it's life oriented.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So you made mention of your book. So what is the focus of your book?
Well, the book tells the story of when I took some of the basic things that we did to help her and to help keep her alive. And it's the same stuff I've used with people ever since. And those are some of the very basic principles that we incorporate into everything we're doing.
So kind of going a little bit deeper into your be different, see different, think different, act different.
A little bit different. Yeah, a little deeper. And we have some stuff after that initial workshop. We're probably going to use that up front with people to draw people in and say, listen, if you do these things, it's going to happen. This is what we've seen people happen. We're going to have people participating in the launch that with testimonies of how their lives have been changed, what's happened. We've had people with some pretty radical testimony. I had, there's a couple of people, like there's one lady that was a nurse that had 3 brain surgeries. She had a brain leak, and she had 3 surgeries in 3 different New York hospitals, and they all failed. And she was deeply depressed. She'd lost her job as a nurse. She didn't have her income. She didn't have her car. She couldn't get around, all that kind of thing. And she heard a guy give a testimony in church one Sunday, and he was the first one that ever read the first manuscript I did. It wasn't even done yet. It was just in draft form, and he was so desperate. And he had he had tried openly. He had openly admitted this, but he had tried suicide a couple of times before, and he was on the brink again. He was in a bad place. So some friends asked me to go see him. I did. I let him read, and then he gave a testimony about how his life had been changed. And she was sitting listening to this in church, and she heard it, and she walked up to him after. She said, "What happened to you that you can talk like this?" He says, "Oh, here." I said, go to this website and get this book. So she ordered it, and she just so happened that she lived about 4.5, 5 miles away from my office.
Mm.
So when I saw the order go through and I saw her, so I called her up late in the afternoon and I said, "Hey, this is Jim Henry." She said, "Who?" I said, "Jim Henry. You just ordered my book online." "Oh, Jim Henry? Yeah, it's me." I said, "I just called because I wanted to know if it'd be okay if on my way I dropped the book off by your house." And she
Mm-hmm.
said, "You do that?" I said, "Yeah, if you don't mind. It's okay with you. I'll drop one off." So I did. I spent an hour and a half there, and she read the book, and she made some choices. She made some decisions, very different from the ones she was planning on making. And she has become very, very productive again. Um, it's been a great thing. She's going to, good Lord willing, if we get the timing and everything together, she's going to be on the live launch and sharing some of her testimony, because it's powerful. And people like that, some others with very short-term diagnosis who make decisions. They just get one little idea, one little piece, something that changes the way they think, the way they see things, how they feel about life. That they want to go on, they want to keep going, they don't want to check out, and that's what happens. They keep going. So
Yeah.
we're to see, people that will get excited and will take this into their community. We're looking to, not right away, but sometime maybe into the fall, end of the year somewhere, beginning to train some people to take open groups in their own communities. Doing it very differently than we used to do it before. We made it difficult for people to do it, but it's really it's not a difficult process. If you know the Lord, you love the Lord, you want to help people and you want to help them live life, we can get them pointed in the right direction, and we can give them some basics, and we can give them a framework to work in and help them understand some steps that they can take. We call them tools. These are tools you can use to help people stay alive, deepen their relationship with the Lord, and keep going and make a difference in this life. Not just living for yourself, but for living for the Lord too. So, and that's why we call it Life Givers, because we tell the people that are working with us, that that's exactly what they can do. That the words that we speak to people, they're life or death, and we can speak life to people. We can encourage people to live life. Some people speak to that they know, and they discourage them, and they take away. And when you take their hope away, they don't last too long. People need hope in order to live. So that's and people. One of the things people need to know is, I just seeing a word here on a piece of paper. A lot of people, when they hear the diagnosis of some disease, whatever it is, the ones that are a little bit more serious, they feel very helpless and they feel hopeless. Or when they hear a doctor tell them that there's nothing more that we can do for you, that's when somebody needs to be able to be there for them and say, look, it doesn't have to be that way. It's not necessarily true. And so a lot of the people I've been called to go and visit with have been told they have days or weeks to live. And doesn't matter how much time or how little time there is, there's, as long as they have breath in their body, there's hope.
Yep.
And you don't know it's up to God, what's going to happen. We pray and we ask the Lord to intervene, and we ask him for miracles in people's lives, and we've seen a lot of them.
Yeah.
That's where we're headed.
No, and it's a beautiful ministry. It's part of why I had reached out to you when I was doing the summit, is because so many people, we need to speak life, we need to speak hope and share that hope. And it's something that in our world today, because we take such a focus on, science and medicine, particularly, in with life-threatening diseases, that it's kind of like when the doctors can't do anything for you, you kind of figure that that's it. And we're denying who we are as human beings. We're much more than just our physical selves. We're an integrated, mind, spirit, and soul. And it's something that when we activate that, when we nourish that as well as our bodies, then what happens is that our bodies are directly influenced. I talk to people about mindset is so huge, and even when you're completely quote healthy, don't have a life-threatening disease, it still comes into play, because if our mindset is rooted in some lie about ourselves, then it has a negative consequence. Might not be a life-threatening one, but it does have a consequence. And so when I heard about what it was that you're doing, and particularly with the group of people that you've been doing it with, it's, I just have such admiration for what you do, because it's so needed in our society today. You made mention of the fact that you were getting ready to do your book launch. Could you give us some dates, some more information or specifics? Do you have any of that right now?
Yeah, it's the 9th of June. It's going to be, Lord willing, and all the technology goes together. It's going to be Tuesday, the 9th of June at 1 o'clock. It'll be Facebook related. It'll be a Zoom call.
Okay.
It's done on Facebook. I have about 6 or 7 people that'll be participating in that. There'll be people who are patients. There'll be a couple of women who have led groups for us. One of them has been a patient herself for many years, a bladder cancer patient. She didn't think she was going to do very well. And that was 15 years ago. She's still here. And she dove right in. She heard me church one Sunday and went to her pastor and she said, I want to do that. And so she started a group and she's ministered to, I don't know what the total is, number of people, but she's ministered to a lot of people, she and her group. They've done a wonderful job. The other lady has never imagined getting involved with people. She wanted to do women's ministry, and she wanted to help women who were struggling with other issues, which she does do. She didn't imagine working with people that had some kind of life-threatening illness. And a couple of months after she talked to me, all of a sudden, she found out that her mom was deteriorating, and she had some serious issues. And her mother did die after a couple of years, but it was through, because of her mom and because of the fact that in the middle of some of that, she lost her job. And then I said, well, if you're not working, if you want to do something, you can come and help me for a while. So she wound up coming to help me, and then she wound up working for me. And then she moved on to work at her church. But people like that, we've got people, I've got a young man we got patients with kidney disease, people with, that have had heart issues, people with various kinds of really difficult cancer, and from different perspectives. I'm hopeful this one couple, the husband has had 3 kidney transplants, cancer, and a heart attack. And he and I went toe to toe, or eyeball to eyeball in a meeting one night. And he really wasn't crazy about some of the things I had to say, but he had a wake-up call that night. And he's told me numbers of times since then. He says, I really didn't like that encounter that night, but he says, I'm alive because of it. So, because I really challenged the way he was thinking. he just, his thinking was a mess. You know
Mhm.
how some people say stinking thinking, stinking
Oh yeah.
thinking? That's
Yep.
where he was at. And radically changed. And well, I know you know this, but what you said before about the power of the mind, you know, I've watched people who were so depressed that they physically were bent over. They couldn't
Mhm.
stand up straight. And
Yeah.
I remember a man coming to my office one time, and I went out to see him because I was with somebody, and I said, "Oh, you need to give me about another 5 or 10 minutes." And he said, "Don't worry, don't worry, don't hurry." He says, "I'm in no hurry to come in there." So, but he was so depressed. He was in his 60s, and his world had fallen apart. And when he finally began to put pieces together, it was amazing what happened in his life and how he changed. And came walking in with a smile on his face, sitting erect. I said, "What happened to you?" He told me what he'd read, and he was just very different. You know, so it's a it's a combination of things, and I think because of where I come from, one of the things that the doctor that mentored me said uh, when he talked about all the things I had against me, I also realized I had a lot of things going for me. And the things I had going for me
Mhm.
was that we'd had so much illness in our family that we worked through, that I had a lot of years. I had time in the military, I had time in secular employment, I had time in ministry. Uh, I had time working in a lot of various capacities that gave me a very broad exposure so I could relate to a lot of the people that were coming through the door.
Mhm.
Family man, children, um, watching my deal with their mother being sick. There was just so many things that uh, helped to make it possible to sit down and listen to people and really hear what they were saying. And
Yeah.
that's
That
what
that is such a
that's what people needed. You know, we needed.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's such a lost art in our society to listen,
Mhm.
and to
Yeah.
listen in such a way where you're not sitting there trying to figure out, okay, how am I gonna, either tell a better story, or how can I listen, so that way I can figure out a way to convince them to think like I think. But actually to engage with one another, to honor, what it is that we're each doing. And it is so very, very necessary. Um, One of the things that I was just thinking about as you were sharing about some of the people that that you've encountered, and through God's grace, of course, have had that impact and their lives have been dramatically different and they've impacted others, is um, talk about the image of, the pebble in the, in the water, and the ripples that come, and how your life has done that. And it's beautiful, particularly when we think about it with those people that might not necessarily have had that quote second chance. And so to see how it is that you are empowering others to be able to really live out to the full, the life that they've been given, so it's not taken for granted, and to go out and to be pointing the direction, as you said numerous times, to help others, is part of why we're here. And so it's, living for the Lord,
Mhm.
and not just for ourselves. And that does make all the difference in the world. So as you're kind of looking at this shift that's happened with COVID, and you were saying that, with the book relaunch and kind of going online a little bit more, um, what or how has your vision kind of shifting? You kind of seeing a little bit different of what you're hoping for, the impact of life givers might become,
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
months and years ahead.
You know, it's one of the verses of scripture that become very meaningful for me. Uh, I love the Word of God. I love good people. I believe what it says, and one of the verses that's become very important is the verse that when the centurion said, "Lord, you don't need to come to my house; just speak the word."
Mm-hmm.
And he had so much to believe that if Jesus just spoke the word, that was all that was needed. He didn't need to physically come to his house. And I have become a very, very strong believer, not so much in the last 3 months because of COVID, but I was moving more so in that direction because we were having difficulty getting people out to meetings. And
Mm-hmm.
this just sealed the deal and began to feel much more confident about ministering to people via Zoom, via the phone call or something like that. Now, I had 3 phone calls this weekend when I had 3 men, younger than myself, but up there a little bit in their 50s and 60s. And God really ministered them via the phone. And,
Mm-hmm.
I count the ability and the training I've had to be a good listener and let somebody talk
Mm-hmm.
and just and doing 2 things at the same time. I'm sure you're familiar with somebody saying that, but I tell everybody that I talk to about learning how to do ministry that they need to do 2 things at the same time. They need to listen with one ear to the person, and they need to listen to God with the other. And they need to
Mm-hmm.
have those 2 things going together, working at this, be able to help this person. It's not just what's in our head. What's in our head won't cut it.
Right.
We can have all the learning in the world, and that's not going to. We need a word from God to change see a person's life be changed and transformed. So, and I really count on that. And I saw that the last few months, and I see that very exciting, and I can encourage other people. And that's been really the story of my life since we opened the office 29 years ago, is telling people, that you don't have to have 75 letters behind your name to be successful. You're a vessel, and if you as a vessel are bearing around the presence of the Lord with you, and we used to use this word in a negative term, being a carrier. We used to talk about people being carriers of disease, but
Mm-hmm.
we're carriers, and we're carriers of the presence of the Lord. It's the Lord's presence is what transforms people's lives. So if we can release that presence and help other people, that's what will change their life. And less is more when it comes to that.
Mm-hmm.
The more we can give of Him, the less of me, more of Him. That's when we see people change. So,
Right.
and that's very exciting. And I see a lot more of that coming for us. I know people have a hard time with that. There's people are having a hard time with the separation, with not being able to be together, not being. I don't like it either. I love. Somebody asked my wife and I a question last night. We were on another Zoom call last night with family members, and somebody said, "What do you really miss right now?" And everybody was talking about what they were missing. A couple of people said the same thing, but my wife turned to me and said, "What are you missing right now?" I said, "I'm missing the people that I usually meet, people I see, people that I have a cup of coffee with, people that, I get to be with. I, I could sit here and I could be drinking a cup of coffee and be talking to you, but it's not the same as
Mm-hmm.
sitting with you in an office or in a diner and enjoying a shit, and a cup of coffee." So we'll be back to that. But I'm enjoying watching God work in very unusual ways the last few weeks,
Mm-hmm.
doing totally amazing in people's lives. And Saturday night, I was trying to help a mother whose son was hit by an automobile and sent like a missile. He was hit from behind, sent like a missile headlong into an oncoming car. It's very severe. And about 14 months ago. And talking to the mother, and they're wrestling with all kinds of things anyway. They were told a couple of weeks ago that they were going to be removed. Their expenses at the hospital were going to be paid. Then all of a sudden it got short and said, "Well, we're only going to pay the 1st of June." And then last week they called her and said that they were going to stop paying as of Monday.
Mm.
And she and I were just talking and praying and brainstorming. I don't know. I don't know. I got a couple of people I can write to, and let's see what we can do. And in the middle of this 2.5 hour period of time, she gets a phone call out of, we don't even know how it generated, but she got a phone call saying that a judge had stepped into the case. I said, oh
Wow.
my. And the judge somehow began reviewing paperwork. Somebody must have called him. We don't know who. We don't know we don't know what stimulated her. It's a woman. We don't know what stimulated her to move Saturday night. But somebody needed to move, and she did. And she began, I don't know how else to say it, she began barking orders to both sides and saying, you need to do this, and you need to do that. And she was just telling people, and I went to my desk by such a time. And I, at the end of our conversation with Mother, I said, you know what? I said, it's like God just finally said, enough. I've had enough of all this. Somebody needs to help this family and do the right thing.
Right.
And nobody was doing it. We're all sitting on their backsides waiting for somebody else to do something. And to see stuff like that, because we prayed, you know, it's such a difficult case, and we prayed for God to somehow intervene and show himself, and he sure did the other night. I mean, he showed up big time out of nowhere, and it was, and I like that. I like seeing that kind of thing. And people need now. People are so desperate. People are so anxious. They're fearful. They're depressed. They get despairing, and they need to know that, you know, God's around. They need to know he's alive, that he still is interested in their situation, and he wants to help them. And a lot of people have moved away from that, and which is too bad. And my own conviction is the church does not have the same position it used to have in community anymore, the same authority that it used to have. Church used to be a voice, a position of leadership. Now it's grabbing for everything it can get a hold of. And we just need God to show up every now and then and let people know he's still around. And he did the other night in a wonderful way. So I'm very encouraged by, even though it's been difficult to do some of what we're doing, it's wonderful to see what he's doing. And I'm thankful for that.
Absolutely. And what a beautiful story. I'm astonished that our time has is already coming to an end. Is there, I was going to say, looking back at your life, your ministry, the work that Life Givers has done, is there one piece or a couple of pieces of wisdom that you wish you'd gotten a little bit sooner? You know, in other words, that you would tell your younger self, or that you want to share with people as they're living out their lives, kind of a couple of takeaways for them from our conversation today.
Oh, that's loaded. I guess I find myself now, maybe more than ever, pressing even harder into my relationship with God, that it's even more important to be able to hear his voice than ever before. Part of the reason for that is the way we have to deal with people. And this whole thing with the COVID, I think is a good thing, because what it's done is it's forced us to be quiet. And the only way we weren't able to hear, a lot of people couldn't hear God before because of the noise and the distraction. Everybody was just surrounded with noise, chaos, clutter, awful. And a lot more people are able to hear his voice. And the first thing I did in 1975 when I went to seminary was I worked with a man who taught me how to pray and how to listen to God. And that was the best thing I could have ever learned, was what he taught me that year. And part of that was listening to people and then listening to God. And giving the person whatever God would give me, and that would do them more good than than anything else in life. And I think that's and I encourage people to not to wait. That I've watched too many people over the years that have felt God said something to them and felt God spoke to them and said, I'd like you to do this, that, or the other thing. I'm not talking about big stuff. I'm talking about little things, that God gave him some kind of a task to do. He wanted to be a teacher. He wanted to do something in the community, whatever it was. And they didn't do it. And I tell you, I've grown men, when I've asked them a question like you asked me, is there something, that maybe you missed? And I've watched men cry and say, yeah, you know what? So many years ago, God said to me thus and so, and I didn't do it. And they're just filled with regret for not doing what it was that God said to do. And so I encourage people to trust him and listen to his voice and do what he asks you to do, and watch what happens, because he wants to reveal himself. And he's been wonderful to us. I've been walking with the Lord for 48 years, and he's been good to us, to my family, and taking us through the one thing we didn't want to go through, and that was, when my first wife passed, and nobody wanted that. She didn't want that. Nobody wanted that. But we grew because of that, and we're ready for it. And we knew that God would use it, and he did, and he has, and it's the experience. I can sit and talk to people very openly about that, about being with my wife. I used to be scared to death of death. I was a Hebrews person, afraid. I was in bondage because of the fear of death, and I got free from that. And so I can talk to people about it, and I can help people with that. And I don't focus there. There's too much life, and even if you're incapacitated, you can still have a productive life. And I know that, so I guess those are some of the things that jump off the page at me. So,
beautiful words of wisdom.
If God tells you to write, you need to write.
Exactly. So that very similar to themes in my own ministry of encouraging people to delve deeper into that relationship with our Lord, and then trusting him when he asks of us what's in front of us, knowing that he will work, and he will, the old phrase, he doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. So in many ways, your witness is proof positive of when you step out in trust of how the Lord can work and make a profound difference, not just in our own lives, but in the lives of all around us. So thank you so much for your beautiful work, and also for sharing it. And just as a reminder for everybody, that's Tuesday, June 9th, 1 p.m. Eastern time on Facebook, and is the book launch. So I'll be praying for that. And
either my page, it's listed as Jim Henry on Facebook. I am Jim Henry on Facebook, and also the Life Givers Network. Either place they'll see information about it. So.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for your
Thank
time,
you very
Jim.
much.
It's been a great pleasure. All right. Well, God bless, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Okay. Thank you very much. God bless you too.
Okay.